This is the Tipp Topp podcast, the TIPPTOPP podcast, hosted by myself, Keaton Ditchfield, and we talk about everything to do with the outdoors. That's fishing, camping, hunting, birds, wildlife, conservation, and a whole lot more. This podcast is as raw, untamed, unedited, and unapologetic as nature. So buckle up. This is the Tipp Topp podcast. There he is! Can you hear me?
There.
Hello, Gilbert. Welcome.
How's it going, Bert? Yes, I can hear.
Fantastic. I'm getting a bit of a circly thing now.
Yeah,
there you go. So for those who don't know, Gilbert is a very big deal, and I'm very honored for him to join us. Gilbert is probably the most decorated and well-known specimen angler in our country. He's a massive deal, and I'm really, really grateful for you to join us. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Gilbert.
It's a pleasure. How's it going there?
Very good, very good. Just another lockdown day, I guess. Level 5.
Yeah, what can we say? Luckily, I'm done with shooting videos for the day. So we've already done 24 YouTube videos during this lockdown period. So that's quite awesome.
They are awesome. I've seen a couple of them. So for guys, if you don't know, Gilbert is doing videos on a regular basis on the Kingfisher YouTube page, hey?
That's at Kingfisher YouTube channel as well as the ASFN YouTube channel.
Okay, so he's doing fantastic rig videos and all sorts of stuff. There's tons and tons of excellent information that will really help your fishing and helps my fishing. It's fantastic stuff. So those who haven't seen it, make sure to go after this chat and check it out. It's really great. Subscribe, like. It really helps the channels, and it's great to spread the knowledge, I think. I really dig it.
Yeah, look, the thing is, it's important for us to create, call it a library of carp content that stretches from tying rigs to all the basic stuff, lead systems, and stupid things like bait presentations. You know, we've had so many discussions about those sort of things where people go so horribly wrong. They've got the right concept in the rig, but when it comes to the bait presentation, they get it all wrong, and then the rig mechanics just don't work together.
They don't work out it doesn't do what it's designed to do.
That's it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I find it quite amazing how, especially with our more technical rigs, how a tiny thing can make such a big difference. For example, I don't know, a normal hair rig, if you put that line outside the wrong end of the hook, it actively makes that rig ineffective.
Correct. And, I've heard so many stories of guys saying, they've had a hook open up on them. And in almost 30 years of doing specimen fishing, I've never had a hook open up on me. As a matter of fact, my 4 biggest fish ever were all caught on size 8 hooks.
Sure.
Not even a size 6 or a size 4 or something like that. And if your rig mechanics work and you get that hook to go behind that bony part,
it's not
there's
going
no ways the hook can open.
Yeah.
Because you can't put enough pressure on a rod to open up a hook. But if that rig mechanics don't work and you actually get that hook tip to get onto that bony part, you are going to open up a hook, or you're going to even break it.
Yeah. That's
where rig mechanics, comes into its own.
Yeah, and also in my opinion, you shouldn't be pulling on a carp too hard, because you don't know, you haven't seen where that hook is hooked in. So if you hook just on the lip and you pull too hard, that lip's going to give in, and then your PB is going to swim away feeling like you won the fight.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
And I've seen so many guys pulling so hard on fish that I think, that poor lip.
It hurts your feelings, eh? When you watch this oak, I'm going to keep it away. I'm like, please don't. Don't. It's away from snags. It's going to be fine.
That's it.
So, Gilbert, tell us, when did you start fishing? For the guys that don't know, when did you start fishing?
Well, I started fishing probably at the age of about 4.5. My dad used to go to Loskop Dam every December, spend 2 weeks there, and he used to be a Kerper angler. You know, he goes out on the boat and he sat and he fished for Kerper every single day. And there was a time when we were small, me and my brother, we were not allowed to go on the boat if we were not at a certain age. So only when I reached the age or the ripe age of 12 years old was I allowed to go on the boat with him.
Oh, big deal,
And 2 years later, my brother had that opportunity. So when we do a 2-week session, one day I would go out on the boat, and the next day my brother would go out on the boat, and that's how it was. So we would fish from the bank, I think I caught my first fish at the age of 5 years old. You know, I cast it in myself, reeled it in myself, and managed to get the hook stuck in my brother's finger, which was a hospital situation. And yeah, that was it.
That's one way to start a long fishing career.
That's it. So, you know, we messed around doing bass fishing, you know, socially, did a bit of carp fishing. And in 1991, I met an old man from the UK, Roger Bryant. Well, I met his son, Roger, and the old man was Peter Bryant. Okay. Now, Peter Bryant, if you go and you go into the history of Raspberry, Peter Bryant used to be the bailiff on Raspberry Lake.
Sure.
And there's actually a swim called Bryant's Point. So, yeah, so I met him. He stayed in Pitfontein, near Benoni. I used to travel there pretty much on a weekly basis to go and visit the old man. And in those days, we didn't have social media and nothing like that. So it was a matter of, you know, I would borrow some old Carp World magazines from him, and then I would sit and read them. When I'm finished, I take it back, and then he gives me some new ones. And then, you know, you end up saving up some money, and I would give him some money. And then when he goes over, he used to go over every 3 months to the UK, and then he would bring me back some toys.
Oh.
And that's how I started. That's how I started the specimen angling thing way back in 1991.
Sure, that is quite epic, because today we also spoilt. How do I make this rig? Yeah. 25 videos. They're well shot, well explained, well everything. You didn't get. You learned by magazines, asking people, getting things wrong.
That's it.
I think.
And we got things wrong on a regular basis. I mean, you know, when I started fishing Donaldson Top Dam in 1992, there were literally just a handful of guys that was fishing there.
Yeah.
And those guys were very, very secretive. So I was the only Afrikaans-speaking specimen angler amongst the whole group, and it took time for those guys to actually start you know, accepting you as part of the clan, you know.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we got things wrong. We used the wrong type of hooks. We had the wrong rig presentation. So you would catch a fish, and then you would lose 2 fish, and then you would think about the rig, and then you grab another Carp World magazine and you read through it, and you see, oh, but wait a minute, there's something like this, and there's something like that. And then, you know, you start, you know, learning how to adapt and how to use different types of baits and bait presentations. Then the wonderful thing of PVA mesh bags arrived.
The revelation.
And I remember, oh man, it was epic, because at that stage, the guys were talking in the Carp World magazines of using dumpy pair leads with a plastic ring, so you can make a free running lead.
Yeah.
We didn't use lead core, so I got myself some lead core, and I spliced up some leaders and used and managed to get, I think it was 12 leads. man, I looked after those leads like you can't believe. If I crack off, I go out on the boat and I go and search for it. Yeah. So yeah, it was hard times. It was really, really difficult times. But, I'm glad that I went through that school of, learning myself how to get things done.
Yeah,
because I remember so clearly that very first session I used that lead core leader with the free running lead. I used shrink tubing for the first time. I had a blowback rig. I used the PVA mesh bags, and I had the most epic weekend of my entire life. Because I started the weekend, it was slightly overcast. There was 4 other anglers on the water. The one guy had 2 fish for the weekend. The one guy next to him had 1 fish for the weekend. And the guy on my left-hand side had 2 fish for the weekend. I ended up with 2 doubles, 2 20s, 13 30s, 2 40s, and a 50.
Yeah.
And that was all in one weekend's fishing. And it was literally just doing something completely different to what the other guys were doing. I was using PVA bags, and they were not using it. They hadn't even seen it by then. And it's, just progressed from there.
Sure. What a story. But I think that's probably why you ended up being such a great angler, is because you had to put in the yards, and a lot of people that didn't have that kind of passion ended up dropping out and not carrying on, whereby you would be there every weekend or every opportunity and worked on your craft, basically, every bit by bit. It makes a lot of sense.
I studied whatever was written about carp angling, I studied. And then, in the late 90s or mid-90s, I met Rob Hughes and Simon Crowe, Stevie Briggs, Xavier Paolozzi. Sure. Those guys came to South Africa to do a wild carping session. And I was lucky enough to spend a whole week on the water with them and catch some fish and interacted with them, those sort of things. I mean, that's absolutely priceless.
Yeah.
And then in the year 2000, I attended the very first FIPS World Carp Championship.
Yeah.
That was held at Fishable in France. And, then I met guys like Lee Jackson and Tim Paisley and Martin Locke. Sure. And Ian Starmer, all those legends.
The people you've been reading about.
Correct. And you end up realizing, but you know what? They just human beings like us. They just, they can also blank. They also make mistakes. They can also have a crack off and stuff like that. And then the following year, I attended the very first Reduta World Carp Cup at Lake Reduta in Romania. And, that was amazing in itself, because earlier that year, Martin Davidson and myself went on a 2-week fishing trip. We spent 2 weeks on that lake, caught beautiful fish, and then that September it was the World Carp Cup. And, we ended up, after that tournament, sitting in the lobby of a hotel. I think we went through about 4 pots of coffee between myself, Tim Paisley, Frank Warwick, and Lee Jackson. It was so incredible to spend time with those guys and to actually realize that, they also went through that entire school of having to teach themselves. There wasn't any clinics on carp angling.
Yeah, the school of blank.
You did your thing. This guy does his thing. And then at some stage, guys started interacting with one another and started realizing, but you know what? I can take whatever this guy's been doing and I can adapt it and I can make it my own. And that's how this whole progression in carp angling really got going.
Yes, that's incredible. Yeah, I love that carp fishing these days is more of a sharing thing. When I started it was quite a very secretive thing, like, are you going to get into Specimen? Yes. Oh, good luck, those guys are assholes. And it's just because people used to protect their venues and their rigs and they it wasn't a welcome sport.
Correct.
Now it's more of a,
No.
come join us, I'll show you how, and we'll have
Correct.
a laugh on the bank and hopefully catch some fish that are bigger than 5-6 kilos. And
Well, the thing is, I mean, with me now working in the fishing industry, it's been, even this last, let's say 24 months, have been incredible to see how the sport in specimen carp angling is growing.
yeah,
And it's growing for the simple reason that everyone is willing to share and help the newcomers into doing things the right way from the word go.
yeah,
Bank angling is such a closed sport. I've been part of bank angling. I've got lots of friends that are bank anglers. And if you look at some of even the WhatsApp groups, guys are not prepared to share. They're not prepared to sacrifice a little bit of knowledge to make someone else also become a good angler.
yeah,
And that is where I love the sport of carp angling, because not just is it an absolute worldwide sport. I mean, we can literally have 30 guys talking on this platform right now, and we will have people talking about exactly the same thing all the way through. There's no difference in approach. The baits are the same, the rigs are the same, the conditions are the same. It just happens in different times of the year.
yeah. Yeah, I really think it's important for people to just be welcoming to other people. And I also think there's always been this animosity between Specimen and Papgooi guys. And it's very unfortunate to me because there's not that much difference between the guys. For me, if people are like, what do I have to do to become a Specimen angler? And I said, change your rig and get a carp-friendly net and mat. That's
it.
Pretty much it. Otherwise, we're all fishing for the same species. We're just fishing for them in a different part of their life. Where Papgooi guys would rather catch more fish and get a bigger bag, and Specimen guys would rather catch less fish but catch bigger size. And we all need to realize we're fishing together. We're all in the sport, and the more people that do fishing, the better it is for everyone. Yeah, there's only so many waters close to you, but would you rather have those waters, you go there and you among mates, than go there by yourself and everyone thinks you're a prick, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And then, coming back to that, I've had a guy, George Hammond Jr., that sent a question in. And his question is, what is the effect of the moon phases on carp fishing, and especially full moon?
I was going to ask you the same thing. It's written here.
and the lacker thing there is, it's actually a very intriguing subject, because if you listen to what the guys say overseas, the night of the big commons, and it's like a legendary story that's being told from generation to generation over in Europe. And it's all about the fact that obviously the moon has a gravitational power on the earth, so it affects the fish's willingness to feed.
Okay.
But there's a but. You will very seldomly catch loads of small fish during a full moon spell, but you will catch the bigger fish during a full moon spell. And I've had that experience where a mate of mine and myself had 9 fish over 30 pounds on one evening during full moon on pink pop-ups in fairly shallow water, 4 or 5 foot of water, where no one else were catching.
Okay.
Now there's certain elements. Number one, big fish has the tendency that they have to eat to retain their body weight.
Yeah, they've got to eat enough calories.
So the smaller fish will have smaller spells of feeding spells during a course of the day, but your big fish has to eat. So they will continue feeding, doesn't matter how the moon phases affect it.
Okay.
So the 2 days before full moon and the 2 days after the full moon are always your best fishing conditions. And just in last week's, the week before last week, Daryl Peck had a video on YouTube.
Yes,
where he fished
Germany.
the German river. And he said he actually had to plan that session to fit in with the full moon. And if you go through that, if you watch that video very carefully, you will notice that he had his biggest fish of that session during that full moon spell. When he did the session in France, he had that one big fish, and that was it. And then he did the lake in Germany, and he was so hyped about the fact that he's going to either miss that full moon or just hit the full moon right. And he actually succeeded in catching the bigger fish just on the back end of the full moon.
Yeah.
So full moon to me, where lots of guys would say, no, I'm not going to bother going fishing, I would say, you know what? If that full moon falls within a weekend session, that's the weekend I'm going to go fishing.
In my opinion, with the full moon, I think it's also got to do with light. Because with carp at night, they tend to, they, like all of us, see a little bit worse. But then when they've got that big spotlight that's going around the earth, they tend to see better. So that your theory of 9 fish in one night in shallow water where light can penetrate on a bright pink pop-up, which is, for those who don't know, pink is one of the most bright colors underwater, because you know it's a different spectrum.
Yes. Pink and purple is the best colors to see, and especially if your water clarity is nice and clear, you will have an even better chance.
Yeah.
But the whole thing comes in, and you mentioned it just now. The water has got to be fairly shallow.
Yeah.
Because normally your big fish, and that's where lots of people get it so wrong, especially when it comes to winter and summer fishing. People think, and I've heard so many guys over the years say, that your big fish in winter will be in the deep water. That's the total opposite. Your biggest fish will always be in the shallow water, from 20 foot and shallower. And in summer, they will be from 20 foot and deeper. And that's where people get it so wrong, because they just go for fishing a certain depth.
Yeah.
For argument's sake, 18 foot of water.
Yeah.
But that 18 foot of water in summer will probably give you less fish. You'll catch, but you're not going to catch a lot of fish.
Yeah.
Now, I've fished with Loki Levis at Dorendry Dam.
Yeah.
In the good heydays when the dam was full.
Before it got emptied.
And we were fishing in February, which was still high summer.
Yeah.
And almost all our fish came from water deeper than 48 foot.
In the between 48
foot and 54 foot in the old riverbed. And Stevie Briggs, he's one of those guys that used to fish Lake St. Cassine in wintertime, even when it snowed. And he was catching fish in winter in depth of 12 to 18 foot of water.
Okay.
But in summer, he would catch fish up to 66 foot. And people say, no, you will never catch fish like that. And all he was doing was just literally just dropping a handful of boilies over a widespread area.
Yeah.
And he was catching in 66 foot of water.
That's deep.
And that's incredible. And that opens up your mind to so many more possibilities.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of times when we fished at Rudapla Dam. Now, people say, no, Rudapla Dam, you're not going to catch decent-sized fish there. But we were catching fish in 47 foot of water on 7-foot zigs in the middle of the night, and they were all above 20 pounds.
How the hell did they even find it? Because that deep of water is dark in the day.
Correct. I went over that area with the echo sounder. Now it went really, really steep. The drop was really steep.
Yeah.
And very rocky. And then you get to the old riverbed and it just flattens out. But every single time I went over that area, I realized that the fish was around 7 or 8 foot off the bottom.
Yeah.
But they were always in that, what we call comfort zone. So we thought, shit, what are we going to do?
Yeah, you can't bring them
down. And the very first thing we did was, that's it. The very first thing we did was 2 grains of maize with a piece of cork under it on a 7-foot zig. And I would go out with the boat, very, very carefully drop it, and drop a handful of maize over it. Now, what we didn't realize in those days is that in that incredibly deep water, some of your particles were suspending above the lake bed. So the fish were actually eating in mid-air.
So as the
and
pressure was going...
whole concept was... That's it. And that's where this whole concept with Zig Fishing comes in. On a high-pressure system, your fish is going to be off the bottom. They are going to literally either suspend, and if there's food particles that comes down, they're going to eat in mid-air. Even on pressurized situations. I mean, when we fished Lake Pietrafita in 2011 for the World Championships, we actually won that World Championships by only fishing Zig rigs. And we were fishing 12 foot off the lake bed. And every single time we cast out our bait rockets, literally 5 or 10 minutes after casting 5 or 6 bombs, it just went doof, 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 and you were catching fish. So that's another form of fishing that people don't do here in South Africa.
Yeah, I guess...
They don't do it half enough. I mean, we were catching fish on Zig rigs at Bloemhof Dam. Okay. And not just myself and Loki, but some of my other mates also. And it's incredible to start catching those fish, because if you had a bottom bait rig on, nothing would happen.
Because there was
no fish on the bottom. That's it. But you cast the Zig out, and all of a sudden, now you're not catching those 2 and 3 kilo fish. Now you're catching 4 and 5 and 6 kilo fish.
Yeah.
And that is another armory that people can put into their game, because the situations lend itself to that sort of fishing so regularly, but people miss that.
Yeah, I think people forget that when, like, say we're fishing on land, people forget that birds are like fish. So you're not fishing for rats that can't fly. You're fishing for birds. And it's a 3D environment. It's not a flat 2D bottom. That's it. Say you've got the 45-foot dam. There is 45 up and down, and then you've got the sides, then you've got the middle. You've got this entire environment that you've location, but sometimes it's location this direction and location in that direction. And if you can find them both, then you start nailing them.
For sure.
While we're talking about zigs and finding fish, Gilbert, could you give the guys and myself some tips on zigs? What are the biggest mistakes that normal guys do with zig fishing to stop them catching fish?
I think the biggest thing that people are afraid of is, how do you cast a zig without detangling?
Yeah.
And
get a brave friend.
And that's it, and a brave friend. But we found some ways that actually works a treat. Now, in the FIPS regulations, we're not allowed to use adjustable zigs. Now, Koda now has got these adjustable zigs that work like an absolute dream.
Yeah.
But in competitive carp angling, you're not allowed to use it. You still have to use the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
Now, the best thing to do, there's two different lead systems that you use. Either a drop-off lead, but you don't put a leader on, and you don't put a lead core or tubing or anything, because that's the catalyst for tangles. Now, if you use an inline lead, we use I'll quickly show you. I've actually got it here. I actually just completed 2 video clips on Zig rigs this morning that will probably be aired in about a week's time. But if you guys can look at that, you see that's a triple barrel swivel.
Yeah.
That swivel has got 3 barrels, a top one, a middle one, and an end one.
Okay.
Now, you pull that swivel into your inline lead,
Yeah.
and you attach your hook link to the other end, and you put an anti-tangle sleeve over.
A long one.
Now, what that does, that swivel actually now eliminates the twist in your line, so you just don't get any twists. Now, the biggest mistake people make is they want to cast that rig completely different to any other rig. And I was taught by my overseas friends that you must imagine that Zig is only 10 centimeters long. Forget about where that hook is. Let it lie on the grass. It won't catch you anywhere. So you have a normal drop and you just make your normal cast. The difference comes in right at the end of the cast.
Yeah.
So just before that lead hits the water, you stop the lead, because then the long hook link will still have travel. So if you would, for instance, put a bit of goo on there and then dip that in SA powder or fluorescein powder or whatever, you will notice a double splash. Now that double splash tells you that rig is fishable.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you fish the conventional Zig, and let's say you've got a feeding area, let's say at 100 meters, but your wind is coming from left to right.
Yeah.
You would literally cast that Zig, so you
Into
cast
the wind.
it into the wind,
Yeah.
but you let it land roughly in the middle of your feeding spot, but you overcast it. In other words, you go past your feeding spot.
Yeah.
All right. Now you would cast your spom every single time on the left-hand side, so that the natural water current will actually make those flakes go at an angle through your swim.
Yes.
Normally you would start at 75% of water depth. That is how long you would set that Zig.
Okay.
So you overcast it and you fish a very, very tight line. So normally your lead that you would use is a heavier lead than you would normally use. So we were fishing 4-ounce leads, fishing for 4 and 5 kilogram fish. And we didn't lose a single one on a size 10 hook. Believe it or not. It really works well. So the whole trick is, now you leave that Zig out there for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, you lift your rod up and you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, and you put the rod down.
Okay.
You leave it for another 10 minutes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you put the rod down.
Okay.
Because what you're now doing is you're actually bringing that Zig through the feeding zone.
Yeah.
And at some stage, you're going to encounter the fish.
Okay.
Then you catch a fish, and you do the same thing again. A highly flavored hook bait, overcast it, and you bring it through your swim.
Gotcha.
Now, let's say you've done that, you've brought it through, and you've gone 10 meters past your feeding area. You would go and cast that again.
10 meters past.
After the second stage, you would then start reducing the length of your Zig. Gotcha. And you will keep on reducing that until you hit that magic comfort zone.
Yeah, till you start picking
now,
up fish.
In 2011, when we won the World Championships, the competition started and none of us even were prepared for Zigs. Although I had my Zigs with me, we were not prepared to fish Zigs, because in our practice session, we were catching like record amounts of fish on the bottom.
Yeah.
But there was no pressure on the water.
Yes.
Now, Loki and I, when we went for the practice session, we broke the 72-hour Lake Pietrafita competition record in 24 hours. And we thought, hey, we are going to nail this thing. But what we didn't know, when we had our draw for the peg draw for the competition,
yeah,
we were on the complete opposite side of the lake.
Opposite side, opposite conditions.
All of a sudden, there was 23 countries, lots of noise on the water, and all that fish just did was just come up in the water column.
Go where they're safe.
So the English team that was fishing in our zone to our left, we couldn't see where they were fishing, but we immediately had message that the guys have just had their first fish. And I said, what are they fishing? No, these guys are fishing long hook links. I said, how long is it? No, it's as long as their fishing rods. I said, now, okay, you know fishing rods. Is it 12-foot or 13-foot rods? No, it's definitely 12-foot rods. So immediately I pulled out my Zig wallet, measured, made it a little bit shorter, got to 12-foot, tied it up, put a Tutti Frutti orange hook bait on, and we covered it.
Have we lost you?
Here we go. Someone is trying to phone me.
Oh, there you go.
So what we then did was we just took Loki Levisa's Energy Peach and we covered that entire hook bait with the Energy Peach, shaped it in SA powder so that it can give off a lot of color because the water was crystal clear. I cast out that Zig. That was the very first Zig I've ever cast in a competitive situation. Hit the line clip, clipped it out of the line clip, put the rod down, put the indicator on, and I turned back to ask Loki to pour me a glass of cold drink. And as I was busy asking him that, I had a screamer.
Hey.
And that was the first of 33 fish that we caught on the Zigs during that competition, and that won us the World Championships. So it is something I've got complete confidence in.
Yeah.
The thing that people must realize, and always realize that, you must always know what your lake bed looks like. You must know where to prepare your feeding spot, because normally the people think that the fish disappear from the spot. They don't always disappear from the spot. They just go up in the water layer. So they're still there. And sometimes, I mean, you must have experienced that. You make a cast, and as the lead hits the water, there's one or two bow waves as the fish scatter away from that noise.
Yes.
That is a classical proof that there's fish in your swim. They're just not on the bottom. Yeah. And those fish you can actually catch with a Zig. And that's where the overcasting thing comes in. Guys that catches fish on Zigs all the time, they don't want to scare the fish on the swim, so they rather cast further, and then they drag that Zig through the target zone.
Yeah.
And that's how you end up getting extra results that you would normally not get.
That's very similar to the way a lot of guys use those bolt machines when they fish on the top with bread and stuff. Cast over, bring it back to them. They bite it there. So it's the same thing. You just can't do it with a bottom bait because your hook will drag on the bottom. But with a Zig, it's in the middle. It's all safe. And if a Zig's moving a bit, the fish pick up the movement in their eye, and it actually draws them in a bit.
For sure. And the thing is, in crystal clear water, a pitch black foam is much more effective than a bright colored bait.
Especially if the carp are a little bit below it.
When we practiced at Pietrafita in 2014, Loki and I was catching fish on 12-foot Zigs up to 20-foot Zigs.
Sure.
Almost at midnight with a pitch black piece of foam, and we just flavored it with a garlic flavor.
Sure.
And believe me, it's still a workable thing. And that was the difference between our peg and the guys that was fishing next to us at Pietrafita in 2011. Because as soon as it got dark, the guys were reeling in their Zigs and they were putting bottom baits on. And we kept one rod on a Zig all the time, all the way past midnight. And we were still catching fish on Zigs after 11 o'clock at night.
Sure. That's quite incredible. I'm going to start fishing more Zigs now. I'm going to use your theory because it makes so much sense, but I didn't think about it.
Yeah. And the thing is, guys were talking about, what sort of feed do you put in your Zig mix?
Yeah.
And it's very simple. I would take that LL Signature Series ground bait.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, I'll add my normal particles, because you still want particles on the bottom.
Yeah.
But what I would do is I normally add desiccated coconut.
Okay.
That coconut shavings, once it's absorbed water, what they do is they go down in the water, and then they reach a certain point and they start going up again.
Oh, okay.
And then they reach a certain point and they start going down again. So you've got that movement of flavor through that water column all the time, and it works like a dream.
And the carp pick it up. For those who don't know, carp will eat the tiniest of molecule. They've got filters, and they will eat those tiny pieces of coconut, and that'll keep them in the area. It makes sense. Okay, so with talking about where finding carp and stuff, I was going to ask you about the moon and winter and summer, and you've covered that already. Fantastic. Do carp follow wind as much as people say? So they always say fish the back end of the wind.
There's a couple of theories. Sometimes, depending on the size of the water body, fish would follow the wind, but sometimes fish would stay on the top of the wind.
Okay.
But there you've got to watch the water. That is where watercraft comes into its own. There was, on Daryl Peck's last video, he was actually mentioning that on that German lake. Now, that lake is not really massive. I think it's about 68 acres.
Yeah.
Now, on the 68-acre lake, the wind was coming from left to right. And he mentioned that on a couple of occasions that the fish were staying on top of the wind. And then he would stare out over the water, and you would see a fish just roll. They're not crashing out, they're rolling. And again, there's different, you can read a carp's body language by the way that they jump out of the water. If they come out of the water and they just fall back, that's normally a sign that they're feeding in the silt and they're trying to clear their gills.
Yeah.
But fish that crashes out all the way and then they just splash on, they land on their sides, that is fish that's trying to get rid of
parasites and things.
Parasites. And sometimes fish that just roll, they just literally just roll and roll and roll. That is actively feeding fish.
Yeah.
So you've got to watch for those sort of things. If you see fish crash out, go and investigate. Cast a marker float, cast just a blank lead, and feel what that bottom is like.
Yeah.
Lots of times people would say to me, no, they're looking for the gravel areas. And I say, but why?
Because people on videos say gravel.
What will the fish do on gravel? Normally, it's that intersection line between the silt and the gravel that you need to explore.
Yeah.
You need to find the gravel, but you also need to find that salty areas. And that's what I've been doing at Ridderkoppies Dam, and I've been super successful on it for the last 2 years now. 2 years ago, we fished the winter bonanza, and on my pod, fishing 4 rods, I had 52 runs for the day in a winter bonanza. And the guy next to me had nothing. And 52. The whole difference was 52 runs, and we averaged 9.98 kilograms per fish for that entire day. And the difference was just when I went out to drop my baits or my lead, I would feel the lead down.
Yeah.
And if I feel that thump, donk, I would lift it up and I would move it a couple of meters further until I feel, oh, this feels like sponge.
Yeah, soft stuff.
And I would leave it there. And that soft stuff is where I used to catch my fish, because it happened incidentally a couple of weeks earlier on. I did that. And when I reeled in my line, there was a snail on the tip of the hook.
Yeah.
And when I reeled in the next line, there was a bloodworm on it. And I thought to myself, you know what? It's so in your face.
Yeah, it's natural feed right there.
The natural feed will only be in good silt.
Yeah.
And then people say to me, but what is the difference between good silt and bad silt?
One's got stuff alive in it.
That's it. The good silt, when you smell that lead, it actually, although it's not a nice smell, it's an appealing smell. But when you get that really rotten stuff, you actually want to throw up.
Yeah.
That's how bad it smells. That's the difference between good silt and bad silt. Good silt is that very thin silt. You know, there's your lead just slides through it. The bad silt is where there's really still badly decaying matter.
Yes.
You don't want to be in there, but you want to be in that good silt because all the living organisms are in there. We did it at Inanda Dam 2 years ago with the Hirganel Salveer as well.
Yeah.
We targeted the salty areas and we nailed the fish on the salty areas. But wherever you had a little bit of semi-hard bottom, the fish were just not eating there.
Yeah. I think from what people have found, in my opinion, from watching so many videos and stuff, I think people always say go to the gravel because that's where your rig is best presented. But I was listening to a podcast the other day. It was one of the Koda podcasts. I can't remember his name. He's a carp fisherman.
Simon Scott.
I think it's Simon Scott. He farms.
Yes.
And
Yes.
If you guys haven't listened to it, take the time, get a notepad out and listen to what that man says. He spends every day of his life watching carp. And
that's the best hour and a half podcast I've listened to in my entire life.
It is brilliant. And he says the carp live in the silt. They actively go for things inside the silt. That's where they're feeding. And if you can present a rig where the carp are feeding in that silt, then you're on the money. And I think if you agree with me, I don't know, as usually you would use a helicopter rig with that so that your lead can plummet into the good silt, not the bad silt. You've just learned what that is now. And then your hook link will sit just on top of that silt, nice and soft. And then you're in the money.
That is where, you know, people ask me, you know, what lead systems do I prefer? Now, there's a variety. There's basically two lead systems that I prefer.
Yeah.
The very first one is the helicopter. And the reason for that is I can literally fish that on any lake bed.
Yeah.
The only time that I would not fish the helicopter lead is when I really fish out at very long range and I have to fish a drop of lead. Now, it's just the way that if you've got a 5 or a 6 ounce lead that you're dropping and you want that lead to drop, unfortunately, on the heli system, if you set that rig in the right way, sometimes on the way down, and when you lift up that lead to just place it neatly, that's when the lead falls off.
Yeah, which is annoying when the lead's...
That's it. But the hybrid lead system, in my opinion, is the other one that I would fish also almost anywhere, for the simple reason that because that is a complete fixed system, that lead clip cannot slide loose. You have to drop the lead. And the way that you actually hook that fish, it's incredible. And that's the two lead systems that I would prefer. Yes, when we do competitive fishing at Bloemhof Dam, we're not allowed to drop the lead. So we would then fish just a semi-fixed free running lead.
Yeah. Because
it still gives you the ability to cast at maximum range with a small PVA bag.
Yeah.
And that's the other difference. A helicopter rig is not intended to use with a PVA bag.
Yeah,
although if you use a minute size, that's it. But if you use a minute size PVA bag that literally just covers the hook point, then you can get away with it.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to pop the no trace bead off. But competitive fishing at Bloemhof Dam, you'll use a slightly bigger PVA bag. And then the weight is just too big. It's like a parachute effect that it hits that no trace bead too hard. So there you would fish a semi-fixed free running lead, and you can still fish at range and still fish effectively.
Yeah. Solar South Africa is asking, what rig would you use on silt? So I'm guessing, what hook link would you use? What would you use? I'd personally use something like a Ronnie that floats the pop-up slightly above the silt.
I've actually got one here.
Oh no, we have automatically stopped. Something went wrong.
I would use.
There you go.
This is a spinner rig or a Ronnie rig.
Yeah.
And I would either use a critically balanced bottom bait, or I will use a pop-up.
Okay.
So it gives you that perfect presentation, and especially on the softer bottom, you'll just increase the length of your boom section slightly. I'll normally fish a 7.5-inch boom on a soft bottom, and when I fish on a hard bottom, I'll go to a 5.5-inch. And I've got so much confidence in that because I know that rig will never tangle. And if you just separate that bead or the no trace bead from the heli-safe and make that slightly longer, you are even more guaranteed of a good presentation.
Yeah, and then which is your preferred? Because I saw your spinner rig making video. Which is your favorite hook to put on that? Because I know it's quite a versatile rig that you can put a wide gape or a crank or what. Which hook do you like to use with the spinner rig?
I will fish it. I normally fish a size 4 crank.
And is that the Kamakura?
Simple reason for that is I've had either the Kamakura or the normal crank. I will, if I know that I'm fishing for a seriously big fish, I'll fish the Kamakura, and I'll just double check the hook every single time. And yes, people are saying, but the Kamakura hook points are too soft. I've got a trick in keeping that hook point as sharp as ever. And
yes.
That is just a small piece of glass. Small piece of glass, and you just slide that hook point over the glass, and it straightens that point. So I've managed to catch 10 fish on a Kamakura hook without having to change the hook. Pure and simply, just slide it along a small piece of glass, and it doesn't damage your hook, but it makes that point just go super sharp again. And then you just dip the point in a little bit of Vaseline, and you can fish on the most horrible silt, and you won't get the rust setting in.
The glass is so clever. I didn't think about that, because what my little trick is for those who are interested is I use I think it's called an emery thing, the thing that girls use to buff their nails. I use that to get that last point perfect, but I didn't know how to straighten that last little bit out. So a piece of glass, genius.
Just a small piece of glass, it works like an absolute dream. So yes, I've had, in the last 2 years, I've fished the cranks pretty much exclusively.
They're great hooks.
Just to give you an idea, the year before last year, we fished in Nanda Dam on the Hirganon Salveer.
Yeah.
We did not lose a single fish, and all those fish were caught on cranks.
Was it? That was the Spider-Man session, hey?
That was the Spider-Man session, yes. Then last year, we fished Rodekoppie's Dam.
Yeah.
And in the 3 days that we shot the program series, we had 119 runs. We landed all 119 fish, and they were all caught with a size 4 crank.
Yes, 119 fish. That must be, if most of them were above 10 kilos, you caught over a ton of fish.
Yeah, we had 102 fish over 10 kilograms and 17 fish under 10 kilograms.
If my math is right, you did catch a ton of fish.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
On rod and reel.
That was excluding the fish that the supercars guys had during the night, because we stopped fishing literally at 7 o'clock in the evening. We pulled in our rods, and they said, listen, do you mind? Can we continue catching some fish? I said, yes, go for it. So they just checked if the tiger nuts are still fine, just dipped it and cast it out. They didn't even drop the baits. They just cast it out, and they were still catching fish during the night. The whole trick with that session was that we only had 18 loop and boom rigs with the size 4 cranks. That's all I took with. I took ready-made loops and booms, 7.5-inch booms with the size 4 cranks. And I said to Pietri, this is our challenge. Our challenge is we've got to do our 3-day session with these 18 rigs. And we used those 18 rigs, and we had 119 runs with those 18 rigs. And that just gives you so much confidence that, number one, those hooks are incredible. I only sharpened those hooks on the last day. That was our open weekend. And during that last day, we had 46 runs for the day, and we managed to give 23 anglers the opportunity to catch their personal best.
That people don't think, it sounds like a lot at 18 rigs, but if you divide that about over how many fish you've caught and how
Correct.
easily rigs are broken and bent and damaged and whatever, that's really impressive. That is really, really impressive. And can I just say, that Spider-Man stuff, I was in Western Accessories the day after you did that video. I wasn't there to buy Spider-Man. I didn't know about it yet. But I was there in the office and the lady came through and said, can we please limit the customers to one each? Because we're going to run out by the weekend. And he was like, but we've just got our stock. And it was Friday and they were going to run out by Saturday because everyone wanted this Spider-Man, this dip that worked so well for you guys.
There was a stage that Supercast were selling almost 5,000 bottles of Spider-Man every single week. And I think they ended up with some ridiculous figure of like 60 or 70,000 bottles of Spider-Man through that season.
Yeah. But I must say, you guys did one hell of a session, because while I was watching that video, I was like, another one. It was mind-boggling.
Yeah. And the thing is, people were saying, after that session, yes, but, we probably fed 600 kilos of particles and this and that and the other.
Yeah.
And that's not my approach. Number one, what people didn't realize, when we did the Inanda session of Hier gaan ons alweer.
Yeah.
Number one, it's 600 kilometers away.
Yeah.
When we got there for the actual fishing session, people were saying, no, there's lots of feed in 15 meters of water. But I went out with the echo sounder and it was down a slope. There was no feature.
Yeah.
And then I realized, but on the left-hand side, there's a point. And that point is a long, shallow point. And I went on that with the echo sounder, and we found 7 meters of water, and it was flat like a table. And then there was another area of 9 meters of water, also flat like a table. And then the other deepest area that we found that was also flat was 11 meters. So we positioned our baits so that we could cover that 7, 9, and 11 meters of water. And on the first night, we had 11 runs on the 7 and 8 meters of water where there was no feed whatsoever. We didn't anticipate fishing there, so that area was
Gilbert, sorry to interrupt you.
Literally like a mousetrap.
Sorry to interrupt you. We've got 20 seconds remaining, but I'm going to finish this and then we start another live video so you can finish if that's okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, cool. I'm ending it and I'll see you in 2 seconds. Thank you so much. I just telling everyone that we are carrying on because I'm learning so much and it's all such valuable stuff that if you don't mind us taking a bit of your time to carry on a bit.
That's only a pleasure. Only a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So you just said you picked them up on the shallower spots.
So we had 11 fish on the first night, and we were catching those. We had actually loads of fish between 9 and 13 kilos. And then we started focusing on another couple of areas. But one specific thing that literally blew our minds was right on the left-hand side. There was 2 patches of Canadian pondweed, with a little gully in between. Now, it's obviously some guys were launching boats there or something of that sort. So it was nice and clear, but you had a thick weed bed on the one side and some strands on the other side. And a fish jumped there. And I said to Pietri, that was a seriously big fish.
Yeah.
And he said, are you thinking what I'm thinking? I said, yes. Why are you thinking that? He said, well, that is the area that he would have targeted in his art lure days for carp. And we decided, okay. But just that morning, my boss came around and he gave us some new tackle to try out. I had to actually take that tackle through to tackle shops to show them the new Daiwa Black Widow 10-foot G50 blanks.
Yes.
So we had 2 10-footers, and we decided, you know what, we're only going to do one. So we took one with and Pietri had a Black Widow bait runner reel, and he had 8-pound Daiwa sensor line on.
Yes.
Now people were saying, oh, it's outrageous, it's crazy, you can't be fishing for that size fish in a snaggy water with 8-pound line. But what they didn't realize is that the Daiwa sensor line is an underrated line.
Yeah, it's
In
actually
other words,
thicker, it's actually stronger than it says.
8-pound, but it actually breaks at 10.71 pounds. So it's actually a 10 or almost an 11-pound line.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, so we had that one rod, and we decided we're going to really neatly place that rod right next to the loose strands. Because my feeling was that if the fish gets spooked, he picks up the bait, he's going to bolt for the nearest weed bed.
Yeah.
So the thin strands of weed is easier to get the fish through than the heavy
stuff.
one.
Yeah.
We dropped the bait, and that was just before dark. And just after 10 o'clock that night, the first
Run.
alarm sounded.
Yeah.
Now, 17 runs later, that is how effective that spot was, but just fishing one rod. Because
Sure.
the minute Pietri put a second rod there, the runs just disappeared. And he said, just like, what did he do? Did we spook the fish? I said, you know what? I think that the fish were coming into that bay through the thick weed bed, and they were encountering our loose offerings on the other side of that channel on their way out of the bay.
Okay.
And he said, no, would he have to take that one rod out?
Yeah.
I said, you know what? Let's try it.
Yes.
We pulled that one rod out, and within an hour and a half, we started getting fish again.
Yeah, line pressure is a real thing. It's not a myth. It's a real thing.
It's incredible. And I mean, one rod can be the difference between catching fish and blanking.
Yeah.
And we ended up with fish up to 39 pounds, 14 ounces.
So close.
30 meters from the bank. 30 meters from the bank. I mean, that was incredible.
And that's a
then
massive dam.
It is a very, very big dam, yes. And yes, I mean, that was it. You know, we took a wild flyer to, go and see if we can catch some decent fish, and we nailed it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just proved to me that there's so many other waters in South Africa that you can actually get results from, where loads of people all want to go out 700 meters, where the close margins are. They can catch fish within 30 meters from the bank, but they never try that.
They never try. One of my things that I do at Rietflei, when I've only been there twice, but I went for the opposite bank like everyone else, but then I put a scallon rod, just a 9-foot rod, just I'd say 10 meters from the reeds, not even, and this rod went first. And so it's people talk about margins on that side as well as this side. Don't forget the close margins as well.
So then the other thing is, people were asking on rudderkoppies, for instance.
Yeah.
When we did the Hirganos alweer last year, how much feed did we put in? Now, you must remember, we had Skalk and Pietri that had to try and do a papgooi shoot.
Yeah.
So they were fishing on the left-hand side. Pietri had a pot in the water for the bigger carp, and I had a pot in the water. And the area that we needed to cover was literally about 100 meters in width. So I had one 20-liter bucket of mixed particles, which consisted of tiger nuts, hemp, and kaboom maize.
And what was your ratio of that? I've got someone here who's asking, guys are asking your ratio. So I thought, let's tick that box while you're talking about it.
Normally the ratio is about 60% kabooms, and then 20% maize and 20% tiger nuts.
Okay.
But sometimes it happens that you can't get hold of a lot of tiger nuts. So you've got to try and make those tiger nuts go as far as possible. And then you would just increase the amount of hemp to give you that
ratio,
that perfect
volume.
mix.
Okay.
And all I was doing, I put out 2 markers, one marker on the left-hand side and one marker on the right-hand side. And I made a feeding area which was probably 20 meters thick. All right. So I covered 100 meters by 20 meters.
Okay.
And I spread those particles over a wide area.
That's a big
Now, the
area.
whole theory, it's a big area. So that amount of particles actually culminates to nothing, really.
Yeah.
It's literally a couple of pips here and there.
20 by 100 is like 2,000 square meters or something crazy.
Yes.
It's a lot of
and you
space
take a
for
20-liter bucket of maize. So it really comes to nothing. So the whole theory is, and that is a feeding principle that a Dutch angler, Ardy Veldkamp, started using in Europe for many years ago. He would take 1 kilogram of tiger nuts, spread it over an area 50 meters by 20 meters.
Sure.
And it would literally be a tiger nut here and a tiger nut there and a tiger nut here. So we had a much bigger area. So a 20-liter bucket consisting of maize and hemp and tigers. We spread that over a wide area. The trick was to put lots of coarse salt in. So because it was like a 20-liter bucket, I had almost 1.5 kilograms of coarse salt in that mix.
Okay, wow.
But I added the salt just before I put the bucket onto the boat to go and feed it.
Okay, so it wasn't well
trick.
dissolved.
That's the whole trick. You don't want to dissolve. You want it to dissolve in the water because you need to change the pH value of the water column in that area that you're fishing. So by spreading that bait over a wide area, we wanted the fish to become preoccupied. So, and I was telling guys, it's literally, if you can imagine 3 fish swimming next to one another. The one's name is Jan, the other one's name is Gilbert, and the other one's name is Keaton. So the 3 fish are swimming together and they're picking up a pip here and a pip there and a pip here. And all of a sudden, Keaton is caught with a hook. The other 2 will continue feeding because they were not spooked. They're actually preoccupied. They're looking for those pips in between wherever. And that's the difference in getting fish in a feeding frenzy versus getting fish preoccupied. Getting fish preoccupied is much better. And you will see that same approach that Danny Fairbrass exhibits wherever he goes. Yeah. He would cast a couple of spoms all over the show. He will not feature everything in one little area.
Yeah.
Guys with Ali Hamidi also does that. He actually wrote a book, and in that book he's actually explaining by standing there and just throwing a throwing stick all over the show, but spreading it over a wide area.
Yeah.
Because you want the fish to actually start looking for those single items, and that's the time when you start nailing them, and you're not spooking the mates.
Yeah.
And that's the way that you end up catching the bigger fish.
Okay.
It's just as simple as that.
And then it also works out better for your bolt rigs because a fish will pick up your hook bait and move off, and then that's when your rig can actually work.
Yes. And so the whole thing is, I also fish on a budget. I don't get my feed for free. Yes, I got a nice sponsorship with the guys from Essential Angling. And I was supposed to go to Klipkopje Dam and do a lacquer session there.
Yeah.
And then we were put in lockdown, so I had to cancel. But the whole principle is I never overfeed, because if I want to rather be able to put more feed in than having to sit in a situation where I say, damn it, I wish I could take some back. And that's for me is the difference. I would rather come back home with feed that I can put in my deep freeze and use it for the next session.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a big difference. Also, with your hook baits, I wanted to ask you as well, is I've seen a lot of your videos, and a lot of the times you critically balance your hook baits. Do you do this
Yes.
regardless for all of your bottom baits, or are there times where you choose to put a bottom bait that is actually a sinking bottom bait?
You know what? I was actually discussing it with my boys last week, and I said, you know what? If I have to think back when last I actually fished a proper bottom bait, was almost 2 years ago when we fished at Aqua Paradiso. I fished double bottom baits, and I ended up getting fish. But the difference was, it was literally on hard gravel. It is a old quarry, so you'll have areas with a little bit of silt and then this hard gravel, but you're fishing close to snag. So I wanted to try and see if the fish was eager to pick up a bait from the bottom.
Yeah.
Normally, we were fishing Donaldson Top Lake with single bottom baits and even bottom lake, because in those days you didn't get things like wafters.
Yeah.
So that was the difference. And for me, it's, if I critically balance a bait, I can fish with a bigger hook, which gives me a better chance to land that fish. I can get a much better hook hold. I create less damage in the fish's mouth because that hook point penetrates, it goes right through,
and it doesn't
tear, it doesn't move. So critically balanced baits is almost as good as fishing a single bottom bait on the deck. The only difference is I am playing with the ratio in I can use a smaller bait, but I can use a larger hook. But when the fish sucks it in with as much ease as it would have done with a bottom bait.
Yeah, and you
no, I haven't been fishing bottom baits regularly at all.
And you think that the size of the hook has got a direct a direct influence on the hooking potential? So like say a size 2 will hook a fish easier than a size 8? Yes. Correct.
The guys overseas are currently using a size 4 crank, for instance, and they're using a 12 millimeter wafter. Now, if you look at the ratio, it's weird. It's something that people would think, yes, is it? No, man, it can't work that way. But you know what? The guys have been catching bigger and bigger and bigger fish that way. One of my friends fishes Euro Aqua. And he's had the most incredible amount of fish. He sent me a message. I'll find it and I'll send you the WhatsApp through. It just made me sick to the core because first of all he was fishing with a size 4 hook.
Yeah.
But he was fishing 12 millimeter wafters.
That's
and
small.
He sent me this message and he said to me, leaving the lake now, had a great session. And it started off by saying I had 840s, 1450s, 260s, 670s, and an 80-pounder. And to top it off, I had a fish of 101 pounds. And I thought, oh, my goodness. And it's monstrous fish taking smaller baits. And I said to him, but have you tried fishing bigger baits? He said, Gil, you won't believe me. The fish do not pick up the bigger baits. And that's the difference. The Koda guys always mention that. They say, if they feed with 14 millimeter baits, why on earth would you want to fish a 16 or an 18 millimeter bait?
Yeah.
Because inevitably, if there's bream in the lake, it's going to pick up that 18 millimeter bait.
Yeah.
But if you fish a 12 millimeter pop-up or a 12 millimeter wafter in between your free offerings, the fish is so much more confident in picking it up because it looks like everything else around it.
Yeah. In South Africa, we tend, especially in our local brands, our local boilie making companies, a lot of the time you'll only find 20 millimeter baits and 16 mil pop-ups. That's it. And it's only these foreign baiting companies, these international guys that are creating 10 mil dumbbells, 12 mil pop-ups, 12 mil wafters, 10 mil wafters even.
People ask me regularly, why do I ever fish clusters? And I say, no, I don't.
Is it?
And they said, but why not? Now, one of my friends, Johan Donald, used to fish Dry Dam very regularly, but he never used to fish for shorter periods than 2 weeks at a time.
Sure, that's a
He's
long time.
retired, so him and his wife park the caravan there, and he fishes for 2 weeks. And he said to me, Gilbert, I have tried clusters, and if I put a cluster out, I catch a 7 or an 8 or a 9 kilo fish. I don't want to catch them. And he said this one specific day, he put out the cluster, he caught a small fish, he put it out again, he caught another small fish, he reeled in, took the rig off, put another rig on with a single bottom bait tiger nut, and he had an 18.9 kilogram common. And he said, why on earth do I want to try fishing clusters if I can catch a bigger fish with a single bottom bait? And that, to me, is always the trick. If I feed with tiger nuts and maize, I don't want to overdo the tiger nuts, because tiger nuts is good and it's bad.
Yeah.
Because, not quite, because what they do is a carp can only absorb 30% of that tiger nut content.
Okay.
The rest goes out the other side.
Yeah.
But if you had taken 10 kilograms of tigers and the fish starts feeding on them, that 10 kilogram tiger nut spread over a 50 square meter area, over a period of 72 hours, that 50 square meters becomes 500 square meters. Because the fish keeps on taking it in, breaking it down, and discarding it. So and wherever they swim, they leave a trail.
Yes.
So if you have a little bit of tiger nuts, you are assured that feeding area will not be that massive.
Yeah, it won't.
And you can still keep on doing a mousetrap scenario and still be very effective.
And okay, I'm being a bit of a devil's advocate here, okay? In terms of cluster baits, because I've been asked a million times, how do I catch big carp in the Vaal? And I often say, use a cluster bait, because the little fish, I'm talking little fish, cannot fit a cluster bait in their mouth. Now, with your theory, what would you suggest people do to catch bigger fish in the Vaal with
Let me explain to you
so
quickly.
many small fish?
In 2015, we fished the World Championships in the River Ebro in Spain.
Yeah.
And the guys are using these massive donkey choker pellets.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Those things
now,
are used
what we
for
were
the
doing
catfish.
during the World Championships, we were fishing one of those donkey chokers with a 14 millimeter pop-up that you just trim a third of it off and you put it on so that it just sits nice.
Yeah.
And we were catching carp. But during the practice session, the guy said, one of the guides was saying, you guys can catch some really big catfish, but you've got to put 2 or 3 of them on. But they did it for a very specific reason.
Okay.
Because they knew what was going to happen. The guys all of a sudden started catching bream on those massive stringers of pellet. But the fish are not picking up the pellet. The fish actually starts accidentally hooking itself in its mouth with the hook.
Okay.
Because it's a bigger bunch of baits, and they want to try and get that in their mouth.
They're biting at it.
So correct. So what I would do in the Vaal, pure and simply, I'll use a fairly big tiger nut, chop the head off, skin it a little bit, and put a brightly colored foam in.
Yeah.
And just lift it off the deck. Because sometimes your very smaller fish don't bother with something that is in their face. They want all those items that's on the bottom.
Okay. I remember there was the quarter underwater videos where they said, why do you always catch bigger fish on, semi-stiff hinge rigs? It's because the little fish, that boilie is in their face, and the bigger fish, it's for some reason a better angle or something like that. That makes sense.
Well, and the thing is, they've got a much bigger suction power, which means that they can get that in their mouth. The other ones would suck, and because they can't lift it up properly, they miss it. So you do get those false indications, but because the rig mechanics is right,
the
resets.
rig
constantly resets itself.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's do last question here. If you guys have got any questions there, we can just write them now and we'll quickly go through them. But while we wait for your questions to come through, we'll
I see
answer.
Dwayne is saying, is it true more baits and more feed attract small fish?
Is that true?
Yes, I personally believe that the bigger the feeding or the more feed that you put in, the more you attract small fish. Now, in 2009, when we fished in France, now in France, you've got a problem with a type of catfish that they call the poison chat. It looks like a little mackerel.
Okay.
They are absolutely horrible little monsters, and they would devour any feeding spot. So what we did was we fed with tiger nuts right at the back at range, but we made a feeding spot at about 50 meters with lots of fine feed.
Okay.
A really big feeding area, and the poison chats were going bananas there, but they left our tiger nuts alone.
Okay.
And that was the trick of getting away from the smaller fish. So yes, you can, if you want to, if you have time on your hands, you can make a fairly big feeding spot, and you can even introduce broken maize and make a big feeding spot somewhere on the side. You can pull the small fish, and if you want to catch a couple of small fish, put a rod there and catch them.
Yeah.
But away from that feeding area, you have that very lightly scattering of bait.
Okay.
And guaranteed you're going to catch the bigger fish there.
Okay. Okay, so this is the one question I wanted to ask that I think a lot of the guys will appreciate is, what would you say is the most important skill for a new carp fisherman to learn and know?
I think watercraft.
I agree.
If you can work a marker float. Now, yes, echo sounders are fantastic, and this new Laurent's Elite 9 TI2 that I've got is like incredible.
Yeah.
But for me personally, if I can use a marker float and I can feel the bottom and know exactly what's going on the bottom, it's that to me is the biggest thing I can teach anyone that's new in carp fishing, because it can open up your entire world in what do you perceive is gravel versus sand versus clay, and how do you detect weed? Those sort of things. If you can learn that, you are so sorted.
Yeah, I agree. If you can find them, you can fish for them. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions coming through. What does changing the pH do? Asked by Adam.
Well, first and foremost, if you've got a neutral surrounding, it's like I'm saying to people, it's like a magnet. Touching a metal object.
Okay.
It's positives and negatives attract.
Okay.
So if you have an area with, let's say, a pH of, let's thumbs up 2.5.
Okay.
And you put a bait in there that's also got a pH of 2.5, what sort of attraction does it have?
Okay.
But if you Frank Warwick actually did a exercise, and you guys out there that's willing to invest in something like that, get yourself a digital pH meter. And what Frank was doing is Frank was attaching that to his lead, and he was dropping it over the boat into the silt, and he was leaving it there for a couple of seconds, and then pulling it out, and then check what is the pH value. And then he would look for and all his flavors. He didn't say his flavors of pineapple, strawberry, or whatever the case might be. All these tubs had pH values on. So all he would do is he would take the opposite of what that pH is. Let's say it's an alkaline pH, he would use an acidic pH.
Yeah, another way around.
And by doing that, he was always catching fish. I mean, there's so many of his videos on YouTube. It literally blows your mind.
Okay.
And then people would say, but what is the most acidic flavor that you can think of?
Probably citrus.
And the most acidic flavor is actually strawberry.
Okay.
Not pineapple. People think pineapple, but pineapple is actually inherently sweet. Your strawberry is the most acidic of all the citrus. flavor or all the fruits out there.
Okay.
So that is important.
Okay, so Etienne has asked tips for fishing Florida Lake. Let's say, just give a tip for that.
Well, what you need to remember is that on the club side of Florida Lake, there is a nice deep channel running at about 130 to 140 meters. So if you can cast up to 135 meters and you fish either a snowman rig, now we've had great results with a coppin pellet with a pop-up on its head, so it sits like a snowman presentation. I know Quentin Lowe had great results with krill, a krill bottom bait and a krill pop-up fishing that. Guys have had great results on chod rigs because there's very soft silt out there. So if you cast a helicopter rig out there and you've got a chod rig on or a spinner rig with a pop-up on, absolutely brilliant. But the more fishy the flavor, the better.
Okay.
And you've got to obviously be able to put a little bit of bait out there. Okay. You don't need to overfeed because singles normally catches more fish than a big pre-baited area.
Okay. Then it says, who's asking this? The Dunks of Chunks says, in what year did they release the Gill Fox Brollies? I'm not sure.
I think those were done in 2006 or 2007.
Okay.
And the crazy part was Ackles brought in 550 brollies. They sold it out in 2.5 weeks, and they never brought any again.
What? Okay.
Yeah, and they brought a small amount of overwraps, and those overwraps, I think they brought in like 50 or 60 overwraps. It was sold out before it actually arrived, and they never brought any in. I think that was a big failure of the Ackles group in those days.
Ish, okay. And then Devet Rousseau says, Gilbert, would you say the spinner rig is the best all-rounder? Fish a pop-up and a critically balanced bait, I think, with one rig.
I can use a spinner rig for doing, like he just said. I can fish a pop-up, I can fish a critically balanced bait, I can fish a snowman presentation. One rig can do all of that, and it's just such a phenomenal fish catcher. I would, if I had to choose one rig, I would use a spinner rig 100% of the time.
Okay. Carp Marlies says, how would you go about exploring the bottom of a dam/lake if you did not have an echo sounder? I think you said it already.
Pretty much the marker float. And we used to on the competitive carp angling side, we drew ourselves some charts, and you divide your swim into 5 segments. So Loki would start the right-hand side, I'll start the left-hand side because I'm a lefty. So I would cast out my marker float as far as I could. I would pop it up, and actually I've got a marker float here. I'll show you guys what I've done. My marker float has got reflected tape on.
Clever.
And I use a rangefinder. So I would cast my marker float out, pop it up, check with the rangefinder what is the distance, and then I would have, from where the water touches the bank, 2 meters back I'll have another bank stick. And I will tighten up the line, and from where my rod tip is by the water side, I will drag 2 meters, and I will pop it up again. But now I don't need to use the rangefinder again because I've now just charted it. I've said I've cast it at 140 meters. I've popped it up. It's 7 foot. So I ride down 7 foot.
Yeah.
Then 2 meters back, 2 meters back, 2 meters. So I work myself back until I'm right by the side. Then I move 5 meters this way, and I do the same. And literally at the end of that session, I just join the contours.
Yeah.
And that's how I learn how the natural contours of the lake bed goes. And as I go along and I feel just like there I've got gravel, it feels really, really hard, I make notes. And if my lead gets stuck, I'll say, listen, I had to pull hard, there's a possible snag there.
Yeah.
And that's how you actually build yourself a picture in your mind as to how that looks over a period of time. And then I played around on Excel And on Excel, I messed around with the contours, and I could actually eventually build myself a 3D model of how that area looks in my mind.
That's fantastic. Like, I'm spoiled. I just use my deeper. I cast it in, and there's the bathymetric maps with the GPS coordinates. It's all there. It saves into your phone automatically.
You see, the trick comes in with the fact that because I was part of the Protea Carp team for almost 13 years.
Yeah.
Under FIPS regulations, you're not allowed to use any technology to help you.
Yeah.
So we had to learn the hard way, and this is the best way.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing better than feeling what that bottom feels like.
Yes.
And then when you end up getting results and you make notes of that, I mean, you know, that book of notes is like priceless.
Yeah, that's your fishing Bible, basically.
That's it is.
Okay, so Cornusdu, I don't know how to say it, sorry. It says, when is your next training course?
Well, that's why we're doing the video clips for YouTube, so that we can create a library of fishing. But yes, the whole plan was to do quite a few fishing clinics this year. Obviously, as soon as all the restrictions are lifted and we are allowed to venture out without any restrictions, the whole plan was that Quentin Lowe and myself would do a big fishing clinic at Florida Lake, and teach guys everything from A to Z: casting, spomming, catching fish, because you are able to catch some really nice fish during the day there as well, and then show the guys the different lead systems and rigs and stuff. But in the interim, if they just go and subscribe to the Kingfisher YouTube channel, and just click on the notification bell, they'll get those notifications whenever a new video clip is loaded. Yeah,
and that's all valuable information for free on the internet whenever you want to watch it.
And the nice thing is, when you're sitting by the lake, you can actually just refresh your memory by just watching it again.
Yeah. Ahmed Hussein says, do you ever use a cloud effect when feeding? I think you did say you did with Zigs, eh?
When even if I have to spom out, just every, let's say, 5th or 6th spom, you just put a little bit of the goo in, or some of Loki Lavista Signature Series dip. That just creates a little bit of a cloud, because normally where there's a bit of a cloud, fish reacts to that, and they think it's a feeding action that's taking place.
Yeah.
And they come and investigate, because carp is really inquisitive by nature in any event.
Okay. Yeah, I also like cloudier stuff. It's a visual signal as well as a nasal, smell signal. Okay, so let's do.
And that's where what you can do when you fish a variety of waters. It's always good to, especially if you're going to be spomming, to add a little bit of coconut milk to your feed.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, add those desiccated coconut, because the coconut milk creates a beautiful cloud, and it smells nice as well, and that's also very good.
Okay. I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining us, Gilbert, and being so kind and generous with all of your information. It really means a lot. And I wish you all the best of luck with all of your Kingfisher things. For the last bit, guys, if you haven't seen it on YouTube, Kingfisher, go to the Kingfisher YouTube page, go subscribe, like, do all those things. Let's help Gilbert get his knowledge out to other anglers. Let's spread the love of fishing. And thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Only a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Let's do another one another time.
Yes, 100. No problem.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Bye.
Pleasure. Bye.